In the remote village of Serafina, nestled in the dense, shadowy woods of Eastern Europe, whispers of the undead had always been part of the local folklore. Stories of vampires lurking in the forest, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting travelers, had been told around campfires for generations. Most villagers dismissed these tales as mere superstition, a way to keep children from wandering too far. But as night fell over Serafina, the air thickened with an unsettling silence, as if the forest itself held its breath. Elena, a young woman with a curious spirit and a sharp mind, had always been skeptical of such legends. She lived with her aging grandmother, who constantly warned her about the dangers of the woods. "Never look a stranger in the eyes at night," her grandmother would say, her voice trembling with fear, "for they might not be who you think they are." One moonless night, Elena decided to venture into the forest to collect herbs for her grandmother's medicine. The path was narrow and winding, illuminated only by the faint glow of her lantern. As she walked deeper into the woods, she heard a rustle behind her. Startled, she turned around, but saw nothing. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickened her pace. Suddenly, she saw a figure standing in the middle of the path, a tall, handsome man with piercing blue eyes. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and enchanting. "Are you lost, my dear?" Elena felt an inexplicable urge to meet his gaze, but her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. She averted her eyes, focusing on the ground. "I'm just passing through," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The man took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "Look at me," he commanded softly. "You have nothing to fear." Elena resisted, her fear growing with every second. She could feel his eyes on her, probing, searching for a way in. She took a step back, her lantern flickering. "Why won't you look at me?" the man asked, a hint of frustration in his voice. "I only want to help you." Elena's resolve wavered. She could feel the pull, the almost magnetic attraction to his voice. But she knew that giving in would mean something far worse than fear. It would mean losing herself entirely. Without warning, a cold hand gripped her shoulder from behind. She spun around to see another man, equally as pale and handsome, with the same piercing eyes. "You can't run from us," he whispered, his breath chilling her to the bone. Panic surged through Elena. She broke free and ran, her lantern swinging wildly. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees whispering secrets of ancient curses and dark entities. She could hear footsteps behind her, closing in. Desperation gave her strength as she sprinted towards the village, her only hope of escape. She burst through the edge of the forest, gasping for breath. The village was silent, its inhabitants safely tucked away in their homes. Elena stumbled into her grandmother's house, slamming the door behind her. "Elena," her grandmother cried, rushing to her side. "What happened?" Elena could barely speak, her eyes wide with terror. "The vampires. They're real," she whispered. "And they're coming." Her grandmother's face paled. "We must warn the others," she said, grabbing a bundle of herbs and a vial of holy water. But as they stepped outside, they saw the village square filled with villagers, all standing eerily still. At the center of the square stood the two men, their eyes glowing in the darkness. "Look at me," the first man said, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. "Look at us, and know the truth." Elena and her grandmother tried to avert their eyes, but the villagers were already under the vampire's spell. One by one, they turned to face the undead, their eyes glassy and vacant. "Join us," the second man commanded, "or suffer the consequences." Elena's heart raced as she realized the full extent of the vampire's power. She and her grandmother were the last line of defense against the darkness. But how could they fight an enemy that could control minds with a single glance? The night was far from over, and the battle for Serafina had only just begun. Elena knew that they would need more than just courage to survive. They would need to uncover the secrets of the vampires and find a way to break their hold on the village. But as the vampire's eyes bore into her, she wondered if it was already too late. Elena's grandmother tightened her grip on the vial of holy water. "We have to find Father Stefan," she whispered urgently. "He knows the old ways. He might be our only hope." Moving carefully to avoid drawing attention, they slipped through the shadows, making their way to the small church at the edge of the village. Inside, they found Father Stefan kneeling in prayer. His eyes widened when he saw them. "Father, the vampires," Elena's grandmother gasped. "They're here. They've taken the villagers." Father Stefan rose swiftly, his face grim. "I feared this day would come," he said, leading them to a hidden alcove behind the altar. "We must act quickly." From the alcove, he retrieved a dusty, ancient tome bound in leather. "This book contains rituals that might help us," he explained. "But we will need to perform the ceremony at the heart of the forest, where their power is strongest." The three of them gathered what they needed and set off, their steps echoing with a mixture of determination and dread. The forest was even darker now, the trees seeming to whisper in a language Elena couldn't understand. As they neared the heart of the forest, the air grew colder. They reached a clearing where an ancient stone altar stood, draped in vines and moss. Father Stefan began to chant, his voice low and steady, while Elena and her grandmother formed a protective circle around him, clutching their bundles of herbs and the vial of holy water. The ground trembled, and a piercing wail filled the air. The two vampires emerged from the shadows, their eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot stop us," the first one hissed. "Your rituals are useless against our power." Elena's grandmother stepped forward, her eyes never meeting the vampires. "We'll not let you take our village," she declared, her voice firm despite the fear in her heart. The vampires laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the clearing. "You are brave, old woman," the second one said, "but bravery alone will not save you." As they advanced, Elena felt a sudden surge of defiance. "Father, what do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Father Stefan's chanting grew louder, his words filling the air with a palpable energy. "Hold them off as long as you can," he instructed. "The ritual needs more time." Elena and her grandmother stood their ground, using the herbs and holy water to create a barrier. The vampires recoiled, hissing in anger, but their eyes never wavered from their prey. Elena could feel their power pressing against her mind, trying to force her to look into their eyes. "Stay strong, Elena," her grandmother urged. "We can do this." Minutes felt like hours as the battle of wills continued. Finally, Father Stefan's chant reached a crescendo. A blinding light erupted from the altar, forcing the vampires to shield their eyes. The ground shook violently, and the air was filled with an unearthly howl. When the light faded, the clearing was silent. The vampires were gone, banished by the ritual. Elena and her grandmother collapsed to the ground, exhausted but relieved. Father Stefan helped them to their feet. "It's over," he said. "For now." They made their way back to the village, hoping to find the villagers free from the vampires' control. But as they entered the square, they were met with a chilling sight. The villagers stood motionless, their eyes still vacant, their faces blank. Father Stefan examined them, his expression grave. "It seems the vampires' influence runs deeper than we thought," he said. "Their control over these people has not been fully broken." Elena's heart sank. "What do we do now?" Father Stefan closed his eyes in prayer. "We must find the source of their power," he said. "There is something else, something stronger, that binds the vampires to this village." As they stood in the quiet, Elena felt a strange sensation. She turned to see a figure watching them from the edge of the forest. A woman, draped in a dark cloak, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Who is that?" she whispered. Father Stefan's face paled. "I feared this was more than just a rumor," he said. "The vampires serve a greater master. We must prepare for an even darker battle." The figure vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a chilling promise. The true horror was yet to come. Elena, her grandmother, and Father Stefan exchanged worried glances. The mysterious figure's presence confirmed their fears. The vampires were not the true threat, they were merely pawns in a more sinister game. Determined to free their village, they returned to the church to prepare for the final confrontation. Father Stefan spent hours poring over ancient texts, seeking knowledge about the master vampire. Elena and her grandmother gathered herbs and holy artifacts, their resolve hardening with each passing moment. As dawn approached, they discovered a critical piece of information, an ancient ritual that could sever the master vampire's hold on the village. "The ritual must be performed at the vampire's lair," Father Stefan explained. "We need to find it and confront the master." Elena nodded, determination etched on her face. "We'll save our village, no matter what." They set out at first light, moving through the forest with purpose. Guided by Father Stefan's knowledge and the protective charms they carried, they ventured deeper into the woods than ever before. Eventually, they came upon an ancient, crumbling castle hidden beneath the tangled vines and shadows. Inside, the air was thick with an oppressive darkness. They moved cautiously, sensing they were being watched. In the castle's heart, they found a grand hall where the master vampire waited, her eyes glowing with malice. "So, you've come to challenge me," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You are brave, but foolish." Father Stefan stepped forward, holding the ancient tome. "We will free this village from your evil grip," he declared, his voice unwavering. The master vampire laughed, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You think you can defeat me with your petty rituals? I am eternal." Elena and her grandmother formed a protective circle around Father Stefan as he began to chant. The master vampire's eyes glowed brighter, and she attempted to break their concentration, but they held firm. The air crackled with energy as the ritual progressed. The master vampire lunged at them, but Elena's grandmother threw holy water in her path, causing her to recoil with a hiss. Elena held up a mirror, reflecting the vampire's own gaze back at her. For a moment, the master vampire faltered, her power wavering. Father Stefan's chant grew louder, filling the hall with a divine light. The master vampire screamed in rage and pain as the light enveloped her, breaking her hold on the village. Her form disintegrated into dust, leaving behind only a faint whisper of her presence. As the light faded, Elena and her companions fell to their knees, exhausted but victorious. They made their way back to the village, praying the ritual had worked. To their immense relief, they found the villagers waking from their trance, their eyes clear and minds free. The villagers gathered in the square, cheering and embracing their saviors. Elena's grandmother hugged her tightly. "You were so brave," she whispered. "We couldn't have done this without you." Father Stefan smiled, his face lined with fatigue but glowing with pride. "We did it together," he said. "And now, our village is safe." As the sun rose over Serafina, its warm light banished the last remnants of darkness. The forest no longer held the same foreboding presence. It felt lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. Elena looked around at the smiling faces of her friends and family, feeling a profound sense of peace. She knew the battle had been won, and their village was free from the grip of evil. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, proving that even in the darkest of times, hope and courage could prevail. And though the whispers of the undead would fade into legend, the tale of their bravery would be told for generations, a reminder that the light of human spirit could conquer even the deepest shadows.